Okay. Hi, my name is Kevin. I love character concept art and design. I love Supervive, and I really want to design a character that would fit right into the world of Supervive. When creating a character, we have to create with purpose. We have to create with intent. Of course, we can always just really make a really fast-paced character that just kills everybody, heals everybody, insta-wins the game, and call it a day. But why don't I just do that? The reason I actually don't do that is because it lacks purpose, it lacks intent, it lacks an identity, and it doesn't feel like it actually fits into the world or game of Supervive. Nor does it push the fantasy of being in a post-raptured, post-apocalyptic, post-Manchu nuclear bomb explosion era, post-neon space-pirate EDM rave experience. Is that all of them? That's all right. So when designing a character, a new character, for any sort of game, the character needs a purpose. The design should speak for itself and offer players a fantasy to enjoy, while also solving in-game problems. For example, Oath. His design, it's a big dude, big hammer, a shield, super armored, and looks friendly and looks beefy. He almost looks like a tank, right? Well, surprise, surprise, roll reveal, he's a tank. When you play him, what kind of experience does he offer? He shields, he heals, he allows his teammates to attack. He can cause disruptions that stop enemies from hard engaging. In a player experience context, you are a noble knight that is here to use your insane strength to defend and heal your allies. A beacon of light in the dark storm. I'll edit that and make it sound cool maybe, if I figure it out. In a game design perspective, Oath actually solves a problem where fighters would have a hard time peeling enemies off of themselves or have issues spacing against other champs. Oath offers players a fantasy to enjoy while also solving in-game problems through his overall design, both illustratively, mechanically, and thematically. So when designing a character, we need to think in terms like this. What problem are we trying to solve? And what experience are we trying to offer the player? This is where the research begins. Again, maybe I'll edit that part too, so it sounds like kind of funny or cool or something. I don't know. Depends if I can figure it out. During the research part, it's the best part, because it's where we actually have to do our homework, which in this case is playing the game. Bow, 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 bow. Maybe I can edit that part too. I don't know if I can do all that. So let's all head over to the breach and play a few games.
Cuidado, mate, estoy aturdido. En tierra, no es posible. Muy serio.
Un enemigo abatido.
Las crías abismales aparecerán pronto.
Just a few notes. I suck at this game. I really only play one champ, and although all experience are valid, mine is very limited to mine. So let's widen that net and research more. We can go to Discord, we can go to Reddit, we can watch YouTube clips, and just talking with the community in general can really help us in this kind of category of trying to broaden our research to hear other players' experiences. Things I did to figure out what and who I want to make was asking X or Twitter or whatever what sort of role they'd like to see. Asking Reddit what they'd want. Exploring Discord, and also just traversing through the YouTubes and watching clips that I could find. One big thing to note though is that it really matters how you ask, who you ask, and what you ask. At the end of the day, I'm really wanting to figure out a problem in Supervive so I can solve it with my concept. But asking everybody like, hey, what part of Supervive is stupid, or hey, what's the best character to put in this, or hey, what's your idea of a character in here, doesn't really help. Might just have people kind of spitting out their characters, which in the end, it doesn't really solve any issues we might be wanting to solve. It just kind of puts in new characters kind of willy-nilly like. So questions I sort of engineered, if you were to say, so I can get more feedback that's more catered to what I'm looking to get, is what makes your favorite hunter your favorite? What role would you want the next hunter to be most? What struggles do you face most while playing Supervive? If you could change one thing in the actual game, what would it be? These sorts of engineered questions let me know where someone's bias might be, whether they're a Shiv main or an Aluna main. What role might be in highest demand? What are some problems a player might actually face if they play the map a lot? and what's something a player might actually want. If I go by my own bias and create that super healer killer hunter that just insta wins the game, is that actually solving any issues? Does anyone actually want that? Is that going to solve any problems in game, or will it just create a larger imbalance? I couldn't really ask much questions on Twitter. You can create a poll that has like 4 choices. And your character limit is very limited. So it had to be a short question just asking what role you want, and then the controller option had to be inside of like the comments, and anyone could like it. However, regardless, it did actually show that a lot of people on X wanted Frontliner. On Reddit, it actually allowed me for a lot more discussion with the community, which was really cool. However, it still kind of had the same results in terms of who people wanted, a Frontliner. So overall, from asking the general player base, a Frontliner is definitely desired. Diving further into the discussion, I can also just see general feedback for the game and really view issues players might be facing who play more than I do. Surprisingly, a lot of them were actually having very similar issues. And just a quick disclaimer, this is not me trying to critique Supervive or the devs or Theorycraft games. This is just what I've been seeing in the Reddit forums for the most part. So take it with a grain of salt. So from the general posting of everybody kind of giving their feedback, the map was too big, there's too much abyss, so people who have dunk abilities feel a little bit stronger than others, and it feels bad to get third partied. Now, to a certain degree, you know, again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not saying anything other than that's just what I've been seeing. So now we have a problem to solve, an in-game problem that we can solve potentially using a character. So at this point, it would be a really fantastic time if you had a team to just get together and start discussing stuff like this, what everyone thinks, and kind of just brainstorming everything. I'm sort of missing a few of those kind of abilities to, you know, talk with some people. But I do really believe that this is a fundamental enough part to the pipeline and workflow of designing a character that I wanted to mention it regardless. But with all of that, we can now finally move on to the next phase. So this is when the design starts feeling like it's coming to life in a sort of way. This is the part where we find our inspiration's source, ultimately meaning, is this communicating the right idea? And is this cool enough? Is this going to offer a fantasy that someone actually wants to experience, or is this going to just be one of our OCs that lives and dies in our head? In order to make sure we're communicating the right idea to the players, we actually have to have an idea of what we want to communicate to the player. It's really important not to shoot down ideas here. Don't be afraid of doing something that might seem dumb or not unique enough. Just let the ideas flow, let them evolve naturally. There's many ways of approaching this. It really just depends on how well you know what you want already and what works for you. For us, we already know the role we want and the problems we need to solve. So we can go about it using a brainstorming map. At least that's what I'm gonna do. Again, there's no wrong way to do this as long as it helps create a path to the goal you're aiming for. But before we do that, we really have to ask ourselves, what does it actually mean to be a frontliner in Supervive? Supervive is still a very young, early game. Even them themselves are slowly discovering certain things as well. Right now, when it comes to frontliners, we have 2 examples, Oath and Felix. Oath is very much what you imagine a tank to be, which is kind of what they're using frontliners to replace in terms of. Oath has a shield, Oath is beefy, Oath causes disruption, and he even heals his allies. Felix, on the other hand, Felix is just not as traditional as a tank. Regardless, according to Supervive, a frontliner is a tank that soaks up hits for the team and balances toughness with solid damage output. So for this character, I'm probably going to use Oath more as an example, sort of a base, more than Felix. However, I still think it's really important to use Felix in the sense of other stuff that a frontliner is allowed to do. You know, they're called frontliners, not tanks, for a reason. So let's kind of utilize that. Now we have our problem. The map is too big, there's too much abyss, and it feels bad to get third-partied. We have a role in mind, a frontliner. And now we have everything we need to start ideating. Starting with the brain map. Brain rot? Brain map. Brain map. At level 1, I'm thinking about what are some solutions to the problems that could align with being a frontliner. Maybe they could fly or teleport, or maybe they can heal or terraform. At level 2, I'm thinking about what those solutions actually look like. How do they teleport? How do they fly? How are they tanky? How do they heal? At level 3, I'm thinking of actual potential characters they could be and what kind of fantasy they can offer to the player. Level 4, I'm thinking of grabbing those characters and actually having movesets and a little more fleshed out, how they could address the problems at hand. Moving on from this phase, I'm taking what I made there and I'm looking at images of characters with shape language that would communicate what I want the audience to understand from the character. Is it a big, bulky dude who flies around? Is it a more petite person who can maybe benefit from shields and barriers? All these shapes such as rectangles, circles, triangles, etc., a mix of them all. What is actually in the silhouettes that I'm looking at that are communicating what I'm thinking about this character? During this time, you really want to try to ignore the details as much as possible and focus more on the overall silhouette of the character, because that's where it's really communicating the idea. At a very far distance, that's all we're really seeing from the character. After finding enough images to feel confident about my ideas, it's time to create mood boards to have final directions for now. So in conclusion, we were able to create 5 different directions to continue with for the next part of the process of creating a character design for Supervive. These 5 frontliners, in no particular order. The Draken is a mobility tank with the ability to blow fire and create hotspots that deal damage to enemies and heal allies. With his wings, he can shield his team as well as dash and create wind tunnels that help speed up his teammates behind him. He has a global ult that allows him to fly up high and crash down where he chooses, creating a fiery AoE cataclysm that burns enemies and heal allies. The Builder is a utility tank. They create turrets, structures, bridges, and other tools that allow their allies to succeed in combat and defense. Although they're an indirect tank, they can create things like AoE shield generators and teleports that help keep their allies beefy and mobile. The Botanokinesis, or the flower, is close to being a terraformer that can shape their environment around them to create obstacles for the enemies, allowing their team more ground advantage in space. The flower would be a 2-part character and would feel closer to being a tempo tank, where 1 second they're the rose, healing allies and creating briars, and the next second they're the thorns, dealing and soaking up damage. The turtle would be a very traditional tank, absorbing and reflecting damage with their barrier, and also being able to offer another barrier to the allies that would allow them to be invulnerable for a short bit. Think Zarya from Overwatch. He could also create new pathways for his teammates and pull the enemy's attention to him so that allies can do what they need to do. Sort of Felix, but less about damage and more about sustain. The Alicorn is a soul born of light, allowing her to cast magical light shields on her allies. She's closer to her glass cannon that relies on her cooldowns and ability management to help sustain her. She can also pick up an ally similar to a Skyhawk and fly with them. Her fantasy is about being the light of hope when all hope is gone. And to fulfill that, her ult would allow her to create a giant AoE, and enemies she eliminates in that space would allow her to revive her downed allies. Another quick note. I'm not too concerned with them being balanced at this point, because unless I have a Supervive simulator to test this all out in an in-game setting, there's no real way for me to really tweak or balance it. So might as well go all in and prioritize a fantasy for now. Overall, I would say that I'm pretty confident in these directions. I definitely feel more excited about some than others, but they're all still growing, they're all still developing. They'll probably pivot a whole bunch and mix together a little bit. And honestly, that's what I love so much about concept art. It's very transformative, and getting to find out who this character is going to be and how they're going to help solve some issues and how they're even just going to mix within the meta is probably the most exciting part. I'm also thinking about creating a Trello board so others can kind of follow the process, and ultimately I plan to make 2 more videos about this process. The next being the exploration phase, and the last one finalizing everything, creating his moveset, her moveset. I'm splitting it up just so I don't have to rush the process, and it can be a better reflection on how designing a character would actually be. If you like this video and you want to see more, please feel free to follow along. And if you didn't like it, womp womp, too bad, so sad. Anyways, bye. Bye bye. You think I should put effects on that one? Can I do effects on that one? Honestly, I'm probably not going to